10. Albanian underground air base. Built near a mountain outside the city of Lecce in northern Albania, the Jadar air base was originally meant to prevent the Yugoslav Air Force from entering the country's airspace. Construction began in 1969 and the base was completed in the mid-70s. It took a long time to build the base due to its complex features, which include tunnels built directly into the mountain. These passages were used for storing aircraft and had enough room for around 50 planes plus personnel. In 1997, members of a rebel movement stormed the base amid a national revolt against the Albanian government. They destroyed several buildings, including the control tower, and the soldiers who were stationed at the property fled, leaving it abandoned. The ruined structures were never rebuilt due to a lack of funding, and in 2000, all flying operations to and from the base ended. There's currently no permanent military presence here, and the site functions as a storage facility for planes that have been taken out of service. Over 70 aircraft sit both outside and in the tunnels, falling further into decay alongside the equally dilapidated installations that have also been left to rot. 9. Lake Norman mystery wreck. In 2013, firefighters from the Charlotte Fire Department in North Carolina discovered a submerged seaplane in Lake Norman using sonar technology. The aircraft wasn't visible from the surface. It was sitting at the deepest part of the lake, 90 feet, 27 meters below the water's surface. To get a closer look, the fire department sent divers to the site, where they identified the wreck as a single-engine, single-seat plane. The crew couldn't get the aircraft's doors open, but they searched thoroughly enough to know that there were no remains of crash victims inside. One woman, Barbara Anderson, thought the plane might be hers. 30 years before the discovery of the sunken seaplane, Anderson's plane went missing. She ultimately learned that it rolled into the water and sank when flight instructors who were using it for training forgot to engage the parking brake properly. Anderson had spent years and thousands of dollars searching for her missing plane to no avail. As of November 2013, the Federal Aviation Administration was attempting to figure out who the owner of the plane was and vowed not to remove it from the water until that determination was made. Whether or not the owner has been reunited with their plane remains unknown, as the stories remained conspicuously absent from the news since then. 8. Disputed jumbo jet. Back in 2016, the owner of the Evergreen Aviation and Space Museum in McMinnville, Oregon, ran into money problems. A foreclosure auction of the nonprofit's assets was scheduled when he decided to declare bankruptcy at the last minute, putting the sale on hold indefinitely. The foundation's trustee, Lisa Anderson, told Oregon Live that the organization had tried to negotiate the sale of its assets to satisfy a $2.2 million debt to a construction company after already ponying up $150 million. But the parties simply couldn't come to an agreement, prompting the decision to go bankrupt. 6 years later, the matter is still being settled. The Yamhill County Sheriff's Office recently announced that a derelict Boeing 748 jumbo jet that sits outside the former museum will soon be sold at a foreclosure auction. Across the fuselage, the plane bears the name of the former company, Evergreen International Aviation. The once worldwide company was founded in 1960, but abruptly went out of business in late 2013, shortly before filing for bankruptcy the following year. Entrepreneur Bill Stoller, whose company McMinnville Properties owns the property, hopes to secure ownership of the plane when the sale rolls around on July 25th. It's unclear whether this is likely to happen, especially since the museum's troubles date back to its previous owners, who began selling off iconic aircraft years ago to settle debts. And even if the company acquires the plane, they're admittedly unsure of exactly what they'll do with it, according to Wayne Marshall, who heads the McMinnville Properties parent company, the Stoller Group. For now, the plane's future hangs in the balance as it sits at the center of a tedious legal back and forth between potential owners who seem to lack a clear vision of what they plan to use it for. 7. Ohio Aircraft Graveyard. When World War II ended, the US military no longer needed most of the equipment it had used in the fight against the Axis powers. A lot of the machinery was left to deteriorate in machine graveyards, many of which still exist today. Earlier this year, urban explorer and photographer Johnny Jew explored one of these sites in rural Ohio. He was driving around in search of abandoned buildings when he noticed a large open space on the map he was using. Out of curiosity, Johnny went to the site and encountered the sad, rusting remains of fighter jets and other military and civilian aircraft sitting in the snow, surrounded by trees and scrap metal. He crossed paths with the property owner, who allowed him to look around and offered some history on the site while the explorer snapped photos. The owner told Johnny that the collection was amassed by a scrapyard worker named Walter Soplata, who began buying decommissioned military aircraft and reassembling them in his backyard during the late 1940s. There are around 30 planes at the site, including a deteriorating F-8060 fighter plane, a US Air Force B-25 plane, and an old Boeing 727. Soplata left the site to his family when he passed away in 2010. They do their best to keep its location a secret to prevent thieves from stealing and scrapping parts from their historic vehicles. 6. Lockheed P1 Ventura. The twin-engine Lockheed P1 Ventura patrol bomber first saw combat in Europe in 1942 with the British Royal Air Force, RAF. The following year, the US Navy used it for fighting in the Pacific Theater. The US Army Air Forces, USAAF, various British Commonwealth forces, and other militaries have also used the plane. In 1944, a wrecked Lockheed P1 Ventura was abandoned at the Talasi airfield in Papua New Guinea after it was hit by a shell during a raid on the nearby Rabaul township. The pilot, Royal New Zealand Air Force Flight Lieutenant Frederick N.R. Thomas, eased the aircraft to Talasi as gracefully as he could on one engine. It made a hard landing, but thankfully nobody was hurt. Thomas received the Distinguished Flying Cross DFC award for successfully executing the forced landing. The runway at Talasi was too short for the bomber to take off from, and they didn't try to fix it. Instead, it was stripped for parts and abandoned, and it remains at the site to this day. If you had a chance to fly in a military aircraft and experience its high-speed capabilities, would you? Tell us in the comments, and hit subscribe while you're at it. 5. Beautiful Betsy. One day in February 1945, as World War II entered its final months, a B-24 Liberator bomber nicknamed Beautiful Betsy vanished while flying across Australia from Darwin to Brisbane. 6 American service members and 2 British soldiers disappeared along with it. The plane had been damaged during previous bombing missions. By then, it was only being used for short flights and was slated for retirement. Numerous expeditions failed to find the missing aircraft, and its fate remained a mystery until 49 years later, when a park ranger discovered the wreck in Crumbit Tops National Park while surveying wildfire damage in 1994. The blaze had cleared overgrowth, leaving enough of the plane exposed for the ranger to see it glistening in the sun. Specialists from the US Army investigated the site and collected human remains. The wreck was then opened to the public and remains in place today, serving as an ever-present reminder of a once-forgotten tragedy. 4. St. Augustine Plane Graveyard. In early 2009, photographer Walter Arnold discovered a roadside lot filled with rusting historic planes in St. Augustine, Florida. He had no idea at the time that the images he snapped would help launch his career, or that he'd someday help to spread the history of how the planes ended up at the site. They were identified as Grumman S-2 trackers. The S-2 tracker was the first anti-submarine warfare aircraft used by the US Navy. It was designed and built during the early 1950s and remained in service under the American military until the mid-70s. Arnold recorded the tail fin numbers on the abandoned aircraft. With the help of a friend, he managed to track down the names of pilots who'd flown the graveyard's planes during their military careers. One former pilot, George Verney, even found photos of some of the planes from back when they were still in operation. But why did they end up on a seemingly random property in northern Florida? They were moved there from the Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Arizona, the world's largest aircraft boneyard, as part of an agreement to provide Turkey with some planes to replace its outdated fleet. The deal came after Ayatollah Khomeini took over Iran in 1979 and shut down all US installations throughout the country, including those that were being used to monitor Soviet activity. American authorities agreed to give the planes to Turkey in exchange for being able to establish new listening stations there. While at least 11 S-2 trackers made their way to Turkey, getting the planes there proved to be a bureaucratic nightmare. It took time, and 8 of the aircraft were eventually declared unfit for service and were simply left at the lot. Unfortunately for explorers and history enthusiasts, they were removed in recent years and survive only in photographs. 3. Antinov AN24. Behind some buildings in the residential neighborhood of Ulaanbaatar in Mongolia, there's a noticeably out-of-place decommissioned Antonov AN24 plane. Only 1,264 of the Soviet turboprop aircraft were produced between 1959 and 1979. The AN-24 was far from glamorous, but it was built to withstand harsh conditions. It needed minimal maintenance and was capable of taking off from and landing on unpaved runways. This type of plane was perfect for Mongolia's challenging geography and climate. During the 1960s and 70s, the country's Air Force and 2 civilian operators acquired several AN-24s. But like all aircraft, they eventually became outdated and they were parked in residential areas after they were taken out of service. The Curiosity, placed 77-foot-long, 23 meters AN-24 that remains visible today, belongs to the local School of Mechanical Engineering and Transportation and is used for educational purposes. 2. Bali's abandoned planes. There are at least 4 abandoned planes of unknown origin throughout the Indonesian island of Bali. One of them, a Boeing 737 passenger jet, is located at an abandoned quarry just minutes away from the Pandawa beach near the southern coast. It sits in a field along a busy highway, but feels like it's a world away from the hustle and bustle of the rest of the island. The 737 is a popular tourist attraction, but anyone who goes there searching for answers about how it got there in the first place is likely to leave disappointed. Nobody seems to know the story behind why the aircraft was seemingly plopped down into the field one day and was left to deteriorate, and if anyone does know anything, they've kept quiet about it. A local rumor holds that there were once plans to convert the aircraft into a restaurant, but the owner ran out of money. But these claims are unverified, and in some ways, that's not a bad thing. In fact, many people are actually drawn to the site by the plane's mysterious past, and they might find it less interesting if they knew where it came from and why. Either way, the property owner is happy to let visitors look around, for a price, of course. After the plane began attracting tourists, they installed a gated fence and hired a security guard to ensure that anyone who wants to take a peek pays for the opportunity. There are also 2 other abandoned 737s in seemingly random places throughout Bali, including one that sits next door to a Dunkin' Donuts and almost touches the building, as well as a McDonnell Douglas DC-10. Little is known about how any of these decaying aircraft ended up at their current resting places, but many suspect that they're the result of failed business ventures. 1. Mi-6 chopper. During an oil prospecting expedition in 1981, an Mi-6 helicopter stopped to refuel at the Kalampur base in Russia's Yamalo-Nenets region, roughly 1,500 miles, 2,414 kilometers outside Moscow. 5 minutes after the chopper took off, its engines failed, forcing its pilots to crash land in a swamp. Thankfully, nobody was hurt, but the chopper was severely damaged. An investigation revealed that workers at the base had accidentally filled the fuel tanks with a mixture of gas and water, which is what killed the engines. Over 40 years later, the wreck is still sitting in the swamp, and as far as anyone knows, there are no plans to remove it. The MIL Mi-6 was a heavy transport helicopter that was built for both military and civilian use. It was first built in 1959 and was the largest helicopter in production until it was superseded by the MIL Mi-26 in 1980. The colossal chopper is normally flown by a flight crew consisting of at least 5 members and can seat up to 65 armed troops. It can also carry vehicles and other large bulky loads of equipment. Over 900 Mi-6s were built before the model was retired in 2002.
6. Star Wars set in Tunisia. Star Wars is one of the most popular and influential sci-fi franchises ever made. But not many people know that some of its iconic filming locations still exist out in the real world. The planet Tatooine, where Luke Skywalker was raised and where he met General Obi-Wan Kenobi, was mostly filmed in Tunisia, a country located in North Africa. The filmmakers built elaborate sets up in the desert to form the illusion of a harsh and isolated world. And after the shooting was done, they left them all behind. Some of those sets are still standing out there today, almost 50 years after the first movie was released to the public. One of them is Luke's childhood home, which is also known as the Lars Homestead. It's a dome-shaped structure made of plaster and wood, surrounded by a moisture farm. It was used in 4 different Star Wars movies: A New Hope, The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith, and is located near the town of Nifty. It has become a very popular tourist attraction for Star Wars fanatics. Another set found in Tunisia is the Mos Espa spaceport, where young Anakin Skywalker lived and drove pod racers. It's a small complex of buildings and props that resemble a futuristic city in the middle of the desert. It was built for the Phantom Menace and covers an area of about 107.6 feet. It's situated near the village of Ong Jamel and has also attracted many visitors over the years. But these sets are not immune to the forces of nature. They've been exposed to the elements, including sandstorms, erosion, vandalism, and theft. Some parts have been damaged or stolen, while others have been restored or preserved by fans and various organizations. The Tunisian government has also recognized the cultural and economic value of these sets and have taken steps to better protect them. These sets are not only relics of cinematic history, but also key witnesses to a galaxy far, far away. 5. The Skeleton Coast. The Skeleton Coast makes up a portion of the Atlantic coast of Namibia, where many ships have met their final resting place thanks to the harsh conditions of fog, wind, currents, and rocks. The ominous name comes from the whale and seal bones that used to cover the shore, as well as the human skeletons of shipwrecked sailors who could not survive in the harsh desert environment. The Skeleton Coast is also known as the largest ship cemetery on Earth, home to hundreds of shipwrecks. The Skeleton Coast has been a dangerous area for naval vessels for thousands of years since ancient times. One of the oldest shipwrecks in the area is the Bom Jesus, a Portuguese ship that was wrecked during the 1530s. It's one of the oldest discovered shipwrecks of the Iberian Atlantic tradition in sub-Saharan Africa. The Bom Jesus carried gold, silver, copper, ivory, and other extremely valuable items that were finally recovered by archaeologists in 2008. The Skeleton Coast became even more notorious in the 19th and 20th centuries, when European explorers, traders, and colonizers frequently sailed along its shores. Many ships of the Wehrmann Line, a German company that ran passenger and cargo services between Europe and Africa, were wrecked here. Some of the most famous wrecks are the Gertrude Wehrmann II, which ran aground in thick fog on a reef near Swakopmund back in 1904, and the Edward Bolen, which lost its way at Conception Bay in 1909. The Edward Bolen is one of the most photographed shipwrecks in all of Namibia. Currently, it's 2,624 feet inland and partially buried under sand. The Skeleton Coast also witnessed some dramatic rescue missions during World War II, when several Allied ships were stranded and attacked by German forces. One of the most remarkable stories comes from the Dunedin Star, a British refrigerated cargo passenger liner that ran aground 40 kilometers south of the Kunene River mouth in 1942. The Dunedin Star had 106 people on board who managed to reach the shore thanks to the help of a Norwegian cargo ship. But their ordeal was not over, since they had to survive in the barren desert with limited supplies and drinkable water. Several planes were sent to help them, but some of them crashed or got stuck in sand. Eventually, after 2 months of hardship and heroism, every one of the survivors were rescued by either land or air. The Skeleton Coast is a place that tells stories of adventure, tragedy, and survival. It's a place that reveals the power and danger of nature, as well as the courage and resilience of human beings. The coast preserves the history of hundreds of ships that have met their fate on its shores. 4. A mass grave. Chile's Atacama Desert is one of the driest and most inhospitable places on Earth, but it also holds an incredible secret: a mass grave full of 40 whales, several dolphins, and other ancient sea mammals that died millions of years ago. How did these creatures end up so far from the ocean, you might ask? And what killed them? The answer lies in a strange phenomenon known as harmful algal blooms, or HABs for short. These are outbreaks of microscopic algae that grow rapidly and produce toxins that affect the nervous system, liver, or digestive systems of both marine animals and humans. HABs can happen naturally or be triggered by human activities like pollution, overfishing, and climate change. Researchers believe that nearly 6 million years ago, a massive HAB took place in the Pacific Ocean near the coast of Chile. The toxins from the algae killed many whales and other mammals that typically fed on plankton or fish. The currents then carried the dead or dying animals into a shallow tidal canal that led into an estuary. There, the creatures became stranded on the flat sands and were eventually buried by sediment over time. The fossils were discovered back in 2010 during the construction of a highway in the Atacama Desert. The site, Cerro Balena, Whale Hill, is one of the largest and most diverse fossil marine mammal assemblages in the world. It holds 4 distinct layers of fossils, indicating that the HAB event was repeated at least 4 different times over a period of several thousand years. The Cerro Balena fossils provide a unique window into the past ecology and evolution of marine mammals in South America. They also deliver a warning for the present and future, since HABs are becoming more frequent and severe thanks to human impacts on the oceans. Have you ever found something strange in the desert? Let us know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you're enjoying the video. 3. the Boulder City Pet Cemetery. The Boulder City Pet Cemetery is a unique and fascinating place that reflects the devotion of pet owners across southern Nevada. Located in the middle of the desert, about 25 miles from Las Vegas, the cemetery houses hundreds of handmade tombstones that honor the memory of animals, from dogs and cats to horses and monkeys. The cemetery is not officially sanctioned by authorities and is technically illegal to bury remains there. But that hasn't stopped people from doing so since the 1930s, when the cemetery was apparently started by a man named Emery Lockett, who offered plots of land to civilians in the desert for a fee. Another possible founder is Marwood Dowd, who buried his own pets there and strongly encouraged others to do the same. The cemetery is a testament to the creativity and individuality of each of the pets' owners, who crafted their own memorials using different materials and styles. Some are simple wooden crosses with handwritten names, while others are elaborate structures built up with fences, statues, toys, and flowers. Some have funny or heartfelt messages, while others have religious or patriotic symbols. Some are well-maintained and regularly visited, while others are weathered and seem to be forgotten. The cemetery is also shrouded in mystery and many rumors, since some believe it's not only a resting place for pets, but also for a few humans. Some speculate that the cemetery was once used as a clandestine burial ground for victims of mafia activity in Las Vegas, since it's close enough to the city but far enough from prying eyes. Others claim that they've heard or seen paranormal phenomena going on in the cemetery, such as ghostly sounds, lights, or apparitions. The Boulder City Pet Cemetery is a remarkable site that deserves to be explored and appreciated by anyone who loves animals or is curious about history. It's a desert oasis full of love and mystery that reveals the stories and personalities of both the pets and their owners. 2. Video Game Burial Site. The Atari video game burial was one of the most notorious events that happened in the history of the video game industry. It went down in 1983, when Atari Inc., a leading company in the arcade and home console markets, faced a major financial crisis because of the oversaturation and decline of the video game market. Atari produced millions of cartridges for its games, but many of them were unsold or returned by retailers. One of the most infamous examples of this was E.T. the Extraterrestrial, a game that was based on the popular movie and was rushed to meet the holiday season deadline. The game was widely criticized for poor quality and poor gameplay, and became a massive commercial flop. Atari reportedly had millions of unsold ET cartridges, along with more unpopular titles such as Pac-Man and Raiders of the Lost Ark. In September 1983, Atari decided to get rid of these unwanted cartridges by dumping them in a landfill near Alamogordo, New Mexico. The company hired a contractor to transport and bury the games in a secret location, hoping to avoid publicity and any controversy. But the media soon caught wind of the operation and extensively reported on it. The landfill had to be guarded by security personnel and covered with concrete to prevent scavengers from digging up the cartridges. The event was seen as a symbol of Atari's downfall and the tragic end of a golden age of video games. For decades, the Atari video game burial was shrouded in mystery. Some people doubted that it ever happened or that it involved such a large number of cartridges. Others wondered what else could be buried in the landfill, or if any of the cartridges were actually still playable. In 2014, a team of filmmakers, archaeologists, and enthusiasts received permission from the city of Alamogordo to excavate the landfill and search for the buried cartridges. The excavation was filmed for a documentary called Atari Game Over. The team managed to find over 1,300 cartridges of various games, including E.T., confirming the existence and location of the burial site. The recovered cartridges were cleaned and tested, and some of them were then auctioned off to collectors and museums. The excavation also revealed other items that were buried along with the cartridges, like consoles, controllers, joysticks, keyboards, and promotional materials. The Atari video game burial is a fascinating story that reflects the rise and fall of a pioneering company in the gaming industry. It also shows how video games have become such a huge part of our culture and history, and how they can inspire nostalgia among generations of gamers. 1. The Ten Commandments film set, one of the most impressive and mysterious film sets ever created, is buried in the sand dunes of California. It's the colossal replica of ancient Egypt built for the 1923 silent movie The Ten Commandments, directed by Cecil B. DeMille, one of the pioneers of Hollywood. The film was a biblical epic that told the story of Moses and the exodus of the Hebrews from Egypt. It was one of the most expensive and ambitious movies created during its time, costing nearly $1.5 million and employing thousands of extras, animals, and props. The film set was designed by Paul Iribe, a French artist who was inspired by the discoveries of Tutankhamun's tomb back in 1922. He built a lavish and realistic depiction of ancient Egypt, with giant statues, sphinxes, temples, and even palaces. The film set covered 12 acres and was located in the Guadalupe Nipomo Dunes National Wildlife Refuge, a remote and windy region on the coast of California. The location was chosen for its resemblance to Egypt, but it also posed many challenges for filmmakers. The sand was constantly shifting and eroding the newly built structures. The weather was unpredictable and harsh, and transportation logistics were difficult. After filming finished, DeMille faced another issue: how to dispose of the massive film set. He considered leaving it as a tourist attraction, but he feared that it would be vandalized or damaged by nature. He also considered dismantling it and taking it back to Hollywood, but that would have been too costly and time-consuming. He finally decided to bury it in the sand, hoping it would be preserved for future generations. The film set was soon forgotten and remained hidden for decades. It was finally rediscovered in 1983 by a group of film enthusiasts who used aerial photographs and metal detectors to find it. They found several fragments of statues, sphinxes, and buildings that managed to survive the elements. They also found a few artifacts that had been used in the film, like props, costumes, and jewelry. In 2012, a partial excavation was conducted by archaeologists and filmmakers who wanted to preserve the film set. They found more pieces of the film set and learned more about its history. They also faced challenges such as environmental regulations, funding issues, and sandstorms. The Ten Commandments film set is a unique and valuable cultural heritage that reflects the creativity and vision of Cecil B. DeMille and his team. It's also a testament to the power and influence of cinema in shaping our imagination and understanding of history. It's a lost treasure in the desert that deserves to be seen and appreciated.
8. The Hornets Nest. Dubbed the Hornets Nest by NATO, the Vilyachinsk naval base is home to Russia's Pacific Fleet of submarines. It's located on the Kamchatka Peninsula in the country's Far East region, where those with permission to enter must pass through multiple secure checkpoints starting more than an hour's drive away. The Hornets Nest operates in nearly year-round frigid conditions. Established in August of 1938, it was home to some of Russia's first ever diesel-powered submarines. During the Cold War, the construction of submarines and operations at the base was supported by a closed town called Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky 50. The town's existence and its current name Vilyachinsk were revealed on January 4, 1994, after the fall of the Soviet Union. Since 1998, the Hornets Nest has been home to the Strategic Submarine Ballistic Nuclear Squadron, or the SSBN for short. It also houses numerous cruise missile submarines, known as SSGs and SSGNs. The base has undergone extensive upgrades in recent years and is still in the process of being updated and expanded. Included among the plans are the construction of reinforced concrete shelters for housing submarines, ensuring protection from a potential attack and the ability to rapidly carry out repairs. There are also plans to build docks that are designed for quickly loading torpedoes and missiles. 7. Search for the Titanic. Former US Navy commander and oceanographer for the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, Robert Ballard, famously discovered the RMS Titanic wreck in 1985, after many had tried and failed for decades to locate the sunken ship. But little did anyone know at the time, the discovery was made at the tail end of a top-secret naval mission that Ballard carried out as part of the deal that helped him obtain the funding for the Titanic search. Ballard first asked the military to pay for the submersible technology he needed for his search in 1982. The Navy agreed, in exchange for Ballard agreeing to photograph the wrecks of the US submarines USS Thresher and USS Scorpion. Both vessels sank in the North Atlantic during the 1960s, and if Ballard finished the assignment early, he could go ahead and look for the Titanic, which the Navy didn't expect him to find. But when he successfully located the downed ship, the widespread press coverage made the military nervous that people, particularly the Soviets, might find out about Ballard's visits to the Thresher and Scorpion. However, there was so much excitement about the Titanic discovery that few seemed to question whether Ballard's mission had any other objectives. And any suggestion or questioning of that nature was squashed early on by the military. But the true goal of the operation was finally declassified and announced to the public in 2018. 6. The mission to capture Alex Saab. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro is a highly controversial figure. Many think of him as a dictator, and his name has essentially become synonymous with corruption. He's been widely blamed for mismanaging Venezuela's years-long economic crisis. A Colombian businessman named Alex Saab was suspected of brokering economic deals to help keep Maduro's government afloat. In 2020, US attorneys filed laundering charges against Saab, and Interpol issued a wanted notice. Saab was subsequently arrested in June in the West African island of Cape Verde, where his private plane had stopped to refuel while en route to Iran. American officials requested Saab's extradition to the US, while Saab's lawyer and the Venezuelan government fought tooth and nail against it. Then, in November 2020, the US Navy deployed the cruiser USS San Jacinto off Cape Verde to prevent Venezuelan and Iranian officials from breaking Saab out of jail and taking him where it would be much more difficult, if not impossible, to extradite him. It was just one of the measures former US President Donald Trump took in his efforts to address the ongoing chaos in Venezuela. The secret deployment of the warship was also just one of many things Trump did that were met with widespread criticism and disapproval from the American public. Saab remained jailed in Cape Verde for over 15 months, while the US fought against various courts to get him extradited. Finally though, in October 2021, the extradition was granted, and Saab was brought to the US to face money laundering charges. Court documents revealed that Saab had become an informant for the US Drug Enforcement Administration back in 2018. And in May 2019, he missed a deadline to turn himself into American authorities for charges he faced, effectively ending his relationship with the DEA. He remains jailed in Miami while his legal issues get sorted out, and his continued detainment remains highly controversial among human rights activists who've accused US officials of putting his life in danger by denying him adequate health care. 5. Operation Ivy Bells. During the 1970s, American intelligence officials learned about the existence of a Soviet underwater communications cable in the Sea of Okhotsk. Wanting to learn more about the USSR's submarine and missile technology, the US Navy, the Central Intelligence Agency, and the National Security Agency underwent a joint mission to tap the top-secret cable. In order to do so, they had to bypass the multitude of security devices and protocols that the Soviets had implemented to protect their operations from intruders and spies. The top-secret mission, codenamed Operation Ivy Bells, began in October 1971. And to prevent the project from being discovered, the US government funded the mission by secretly diverting money for it from another project. A specially modified submarine called the USS Halibut snuck into the Sea of Okhotsk, where divers located the cable at a depth of 400 feet. Then they installed a large listening device, which was designed to detach from the cable if it was raised for repairs. Every month, divers retrieved the recordings from the listening device and replaced them with blank tapes. The recordings were turned over to NSA personnel, who quickly discovered by listening to the tapes that the Soviets were supremely confident in the cable's security. To maintain its cover story, the US military claimed that it had entered Soviet waters to recover debris from a destroyed Soviet anti-missile submarine for the sake of developing countermeasures. Teams were actually sent to do this, but there was obviously a lot more going on in the Sea of Okhotsk than anyone outside of the mission was unaware of. But the operation came crashing down after an NSA veteran named Ronald Pelton sold information about the tapped cable to the KGB in an effort to repair his ravaged personal finances. The Soviets then retrieved the listening device, which has been on display at the Great Patriotic War Museum in Moscow since 1999. Do you think there are secret missions still being carried out by the world's governments that we'll find out about 20 years from now? Let us know in the comments, and while you're at it, subscribe. Now, on to number 4. 4. The USS Seawolf. After the success of Operation Ivy Bells, American intelligence officials continued to tap Soviet communications cables throughout the rest of the Cold War. One such mission was carried out in 1981 by the 337-foot USS Seawolf. It was an old submarine, and the constant headache of keeping it operational dragged down the crew's morale. According to rumors, crew was so sick of maintaining the aging vessel that they used marijuana between missions in an attempt to get themselves kicked off the job. While trying to install a listening device on a cable, the submarine encountered a severe typhoon. The conditions were so extreme that the Seawolf was unable to escape the storm's forces, even at steep depths. It became embedded in the seafloor, causing a part called the reactor heat exchanger to become clogged with sand. While fighting to free itself from the bottom of the sea, the vessel ripped free from part of its underbelly, leaving interior parts free to clank around and bang against the hull. It made enough noise for the Soviets to detect the Seawolf's presence, but luckily the submarine managed to limp into international waters and back to its home port. As a result, it received the Navy Expeditionary Medal for its service in the mission. Mechanically speaking, the vessel was on its last leg, but it was fixed up and sent on another handful of deployments before finally being decommissioned in 1987. It was then dismantled and scrapped a decade later. 3. Navy SEAL rescue via USS Banebridge. In 2009, 4 Somali pirates boarded an American container vessel called the Maersk Alabama. It was the first flagship that was owned by the US to be boarded by pirates in 2 centuries. After failing to seize control of the ship, 3 of the pirates left in a motorized lifeboat, taking the vessel's captain Richard Phillips with them as a hostage. They hoped to use Phillips as a bargaining token in exchange for the return of the 4th pirate, who was captured by the Maersk Alabama's crew. The US Navy missile destroyer USS Banebridge responded to the ship's mayday calls, while 6 SEAL Team 6 members flew 8,000 miles from Virginia to the Somali coast. Upon their arrival, they parachuted onto the Banebridge under the cover of darkness. The pirates insisted that they were intent on navigating the lifeboat to shore, even if it meant risking their lives. But a highly skilled negotiator managed to talk them into holding off on the plan by making them think that they'd come ashore on territory controlled by a rival clan. Meanwhile, the negotiator persuaded the pirates to let the crew of the Banebridge attach a tow cable to the lifeboat due to worsening weather. After hooking the cable up, the Banebridge began pulling the lifeboat closer at a very slow speed so that the pirates wouldn't notice. Then, as the standoff dragged on overnight and into the next day, everyone involved got increasingly stressed out. Captain Phillips tried escaping the lifeboat and got into a scuffle with the pirates, who were extremely irritable because they'd run out of the cat leaves they were chewing to ward off seasickness. When one of the pirates fired a shot during the struggle with Phillips, the SEALs finally decided that it was appropriate to take lethal action. Making sure not to strike Phillips, 3 SEAL snipers waited for their opportunity to get a clean shot at all 3 of the pirates, and in the end, they successfully killed all 3. Phillips was also rescued with no American blood shed. 2. Project Aorian. In April 1968, a Soviet submarine called K-129 sank at the seafloor off Hawaii, taking all 98 crewmen on board with it. After weeks of searching for the wreck, the USSR gave up on finding it. But several months later, the US Navy launched a mission to find and photograph K-129, and it was codenamed Operation Sand Dollar. It took just 3 weeks for a team to locate the downed sub at a depth of roughly 16,000 feet. 2 years later, in 1970, American defense officials concocted a secret plan called Project Aorian to recover the vessel. It was the deepest and one of the most expensive and complicated intelligence missions the US had ever undertaken, coming at a cost of roughly $800 million. And to put that number into perspective, it would be more than $4 billion in modern currency. The operation was carried out using a vessel called the Hughes Glomar Explorer. And to conceal the true nature of the project, the government pretended that the ship was going to be used for mining. The team recovered 2 torpedoes, various pieces of equipment, and several logbooks and codebooks that the CIA was undoubtedly happy to get their hands on. They also found the remains of 6 of the crew members who died in the disaster and gave them a proper burial at sea with military honors. Then, in 1975, Time magazine published an expose about the government's true intentions with the mission, despite the CIA's best efforts to squash the story. The agency remains tight-lipped even after the article came out. Several participants have given interviews over the years, but the exact details of what the mission uncovered are unclear to this day. 1. Operation Nifty Package. Relations between US leaders and Panamanian dictator Manuel Noriega were strong for much of his rule, which lasted from 1983 to 1989. But the relationship soured when American officials learned that Noriega was involved in drug trafficking and was sharing US intelligence information with Cuba. When Noriega failed to resign, the American military invaded Panama in December 1989 in a mission codenamed Operation Just Cause. Their first objective, known as Operation Nifty Package, was to capture Noriega, who'd taken refuge at the Vatican Embassy. During the first hours of the mission, Navy SEAL teams were tasked with disabling Noriega's private jet and destroying his heavily armed gunboat, the Presidente Porras. While one team got to work shooting a rocket into the aircraft, another team ventured out on Zodiac boats to a location that wasn't far from Noriega's vessel. Using Draeger rebreathers, which don't give off exhalation bubbles like standard diving equipment, 4 divers approached the boat from 450 feet away. Working in pairs, they attached explosives to the vessel, and as they were swimming away, Panamanian guards spotted them and began shooting. The divers took cover under a pier and were still hiding there when the explosives detonated. Luckily though, they made it back to safety while narrowly avoiding the path of a large Panamanian boat, and were able to confirm that the Presidente Porras had been successfully blown up. Because storming the Vatican Embassy would have violated international diplomatic law, soldiers instead surrounded the property and urged the Vatican to give Noriega up. The Vatican initially refused, and for the next 10 days, the Americans blared rock and roll on huge speakers from right outside the property, hoping to essentially drive Noriega crazy and push him into surrendering. Then, to make the situation even more maddening, they revved vehicle engines and used a nearby field as a helicopter landing pad. After another 3 days, embassy personnel were so irritated by the constant noise that they complained to US President George H.W. Bush. They also began trying to convince Noriega to surrender, and whatever they said to persuade him worked, because 7 days later, the deposed dictator exited the embassy and was taken into custody without incident by US paratroopers. What other secret military missions would you like us to cover in a future video? Let us know what you think in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.